airline companies, like any other business ventures, will have a structure, will have a well-defined reporting structure, which is organizationally, structurally, and legally binding, and will have a defined hierarchy, which is essential for its day-to-day functioning. So, from that perspective, it's like any other company. So that you will have when there is nothing new about it, but then our focus is on what is typical structure for airline management. So, like any other organization, the purpose objective of it is to ensure the proper functioning of the company. So it's an organization. So airline, as we know, is an organization that owns and operates many aircraft. So it's not just one, a fleet of aircraft across different routes, and probably would include both cargo and passengers. Uh, can be privately owned and management airlines. What we have at present, what we have is in India. What we have is mainly publicly owned and privately owned aircraft. Actually, publicly owned was only Air India, and then that, as we know, has been recently sold to Tata's. So right now, what we have is privately owned airlines, and could be depending on the flight routes. It could be international airlines or domestic airlines. So nothing new about those classifications. This is a typical organizational structure for airline company. Again, from the perspective of organization, you can have similar structures for any companies, like operating divisions that are in charge of operations, divisions that are in charge of engineering, divisions that are in charge of HR, finance, etc. So here it's the example that is given is actually this is the one which I mentioned in the morning as a US example. The one that actually what I showed in the morning for airport was that's not a US company. This is from a US, I mean, a typical example for US company. What characterizes the terminology or the titles for using US companies is the abundance of vice presidents. As you can see, the second level after chief officers, chief managers, chief officers, etc., which are usually in Indian context are referred to as directors. Yeah, say after in the second level, or rather the next level in this is SVP Finance, SVP Investment Management, SVP Human Resource, etc. SVP stands for Senior Vice President, and even below that you have Senior Vice Presidents. That's typically the US custom. They tend to have so many vice presidents all across the company. Sometimes it's jokingly said as this one for US companies, that is the abundance of vice presidents. Anyway, that's just a title that they prefer at senior levels. In India, actually, senior vice president or vice president, etc., are uniquely marked for maybe the top second level or something like that of the company, and not so commonly used all across the organizational levels. Anyway, that apart, what we see here is finance. You just look at the first levels reporting to CEO. The finance, investment, HR, flight operations, commercial aspects, and marketing. So these are typically the divisions that you can see across any airline companies that across the globe. Actually, it's applicable to India also. So the titles or the specific terminology apart, these divisions are quite common. So you will have a dedicated department that focuses on finance and accounts, one on investment in the sense resource, or rather utilization planning and handling of the whatever is related to the revenue or the future plans, expansion, etc. And then HR obviously related to the management of staff, hiring, firing when required, training to some extent. All these come under the salaries and finalizing the salaries, and then promotions, and then performance evaluations. That is putting systems for performance evaluations and monitoring promotions, ensuring kind of parity across levels, across positions, across departments, etc. in terms of salaries and promotions. This all come under the HR activity, and that's, I mean, nothing unique about airline companies. For any companies, the HR functions are similar. Then chief flight operation. The flight operational teams will be sort of uniquely having focus on the punctuality, the adequacy, and the efficient functioning of the operations of the flights. And then commercial officer dealing with trades and interactions with other companies or investors, etc. And then marketing officer, obviously, who, or the marketing of department, the department which is accountable or responsible for marketing, that is say, like including advertisement, branding, etc. And sometimes sales may be combined with marketing. For relatively lower volumes of revenue, marketing and sales may be under the same division, or you can alternately have a separate sales department as well. So these are typical divisions that you can expect to see in any organizational structure of airlines. And in this, you can also see that at the in the lowest level, which is shown here, senior vice president supervising quality control, one for security, media relations, flight training, legal aspects, corporate satisfaction, etc. So these are, depending on any specific company, their priorities and their volume of traffic or volume of business, and the emphasis that they need to give for respective areas. They may have multiple focused divisions for each of these. This may not be so for all the companies. You may these functions are important actually. Quality control, security, media relations, etc., training, etc., are important for everybody. But whether you have a separate division for that, that may not be the same for all companies. They may be merged together, etc. For example, flight training and flight operations may be combined, or training can be combined with HR operations, etc. So it all depends on the functional efficiency and the preference and priorities of the specific companies. I've just taken this slide, or the picture is not very clear. I've just taken a screenshot. Sorry about the lack of clarity of it. This is apparently the current structure that is followed in Indigo Airlines. I just took it as an Indian example. Not very detailed organizational structure here. You have, all that you see here is that you have a director of a board of directors, and you have a chairman, and the CEO reports to the chairman. Will also be usually a member of the board of directors. The chairman of the company will be a member of the board of directors, and will be interfacing with the CEO and the board of directors. So CEO reports to the chairman, and then below him you have the IT, internal audit, HR, finance, legal, all these, communications, etc. So this again is not, I don't know whether they have further divisions, or if this is just a representative, or this is only one that I could see. So it just shows the various divisions which are reporting to the CEO. So many of the functions that we just discussed in the previous slide may be merged into one, or merged into or distributed across several of these divisions, depending on their priorities and preferences. Okay, any questions so far on the structure of or the organizational structure of airlines? Okay, now we move on to the revenue related aspects of airports. Airports, as we know, in India are getting progressively privatized. In fact, to begin with, they were all government investments, and they were all in the public sector. But then, 90s, 2000 onwards, there is a lot of private funding that is coming into the airport sector. We will be having a separate, focused discussion on privatization of airports, or how the progress of that in India later. But then, nowadays, or rather, in many of such instances, the profits, the revenues, and the business models of airports are very important. In fact, they are important whether, regardless of whether it is public or private. But then the emphasis on the numbers will be even more when they are privatized. Anyway. So, what we are now going to look at is the airport charges, that is, the avenues by which airports make their money. Now, we focus on the Indian context. The AAI, Airport Authority of India, categorizes the sources as to the national air navigation services and airport services. So the charges related to the navigation services and charges related to the airport services. There is an authority which is for a government authority, actually. Eventually, that also reports to a Ministry of Aviation. So that authority, the regulatory authority, is referred to as Airport Economic Regulatory Authority, and they are the ones who review, monitor, and ensure fairness in the regulations related to the airport charges. So airports cannot at their will keep varying the charges being levied under various accounts. So there is an authority, that is AERA, the Airport Economic Regulatory Authority, which sort of regulates, revisits, and reviews, etc., and ensures fairness in the charges levied by the airports. So the function of AERA is primarily focused on the major airports, and then the tariff which comes under the or which is associated with the services of the major airports. Now, major airports in India, actually the categorization depending on the volume of traffic, revenue, etc., as major and minor. I know it can be, it can vary actually, major and non-major. This categorization of a particular airport may vary depending on the current definition that is used, or the current parameters that are used. But as of now, you have airports like Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, Bangalore, etc. These are all they are all categorized as major airports, and with lower traffic, like probably the say Coimbatore Airport, etc., probably will come under non-major airports. The objectives of the regulatory authority, they have laid down a set of goals and objectives specific to the operation of that particular authority, the Economic Regulation Authority. So this list, I've just taken it from their website. They have listed their objectives as: first one is to determine the tariff for aeronautical services, taking into consideration. So determine the tariff, that is deciding what could be the tariff that can be levied for the aeronautical services. And while determining that, they need to take into account a large number of factors, including the capital expenditure incurred and also the expansion cost for improvement cost for the airport facilities, the extent of service provided, the diversity of it, the quality of services, etc., provided in each area, and then the cost associated with improving the efficiency of service, and the economic and viable operation of the major airports. Again, the economic feasibility of the operation of the airports. That's important, actually. Viable operation in the sense, unless you can break even, the operation of the airports will become sort of economically meaningless. So the viability of operation is important. So there should be economy. Actually, they should be able to generate a finite amount of profits, and so that charges or regulations related to the charges should be in such a way that their operation is economically feasible. And then what are the other sources that airport has for generating the revenues other than the aeronautical services? Say, for example, leasing the floor space of the terminals for shops and other outlets, restaurants, eateries, etc. They're all rented out, so they can get a finite amount of money from all those sources. So these are non-aeronautical revenues. So AER research or also going to evaluate all these and then decide what should be the charges to be levied for each service. So that's the first category, that is of objective, that is to determine the tariff considering all these factors. And then the determining the amount of development fees in terms of the major airports. As I mentioned earlier, the role of AERA pertains to the major airports. To determine the amount of the passenger service fee levied. Passengers have to, actually that's merged with the ticket fare that we pay at the airport. That we pay, not necessarily at the airport, the ticket fare that we pay. There will be a passenger user fee also. So part of it goes, part of the ticketing, this one that we pay goes to the airport as a user fee. So ARA also regulates what should be the passenger service fee to be levied, and this also can be a variable. It can vary from time to time, and then monitor the performance related to the quality, continuity, etc. of the services provided by the airport in line with the requirements that are laid out by the government agencies, and to perform other functions relating to tariff, whatever, from time to time, anything that the government wants, the Ministry of Aviation wants to be done in view of monitoring or ensuring fairness or reviewing the systems or reviewing the regulations, etc., related to the airport tariff. That all are to be taken, or that all are to be accomplished by the this regulatory authority called AER. So these are all the functions or the objectives laid out for AER. Anyway, so based on this, so while we looked at the functions of AER with so much of detail, is to know how they or what are the factors that are implicitly going into the decision making related to the charges levied by the airports. So that now takes us to the various avenues of income for an airport. This I mentioned earlier also. The income of an airport can be categorized into two categories. can be categorized into two classes. One is aeronautical income and non-aeronautical income. Now, this is, I guess, the division, the naming is quite obvious. Aeronautical income pertains to all activities that are related to flight operations. Say, for example, flight operation in the sense any activity that is either directly or indirectly related to the aeronautical activities, that and the income that is coming by through those means is referred to as aeronautical revenue or aeronautical income. And some of the examples of them is the terminal space rentals, as we just uh, briefly mentioned earlier, that is the terminal space being rented out to restaurants, other shopping outlets, etc. The income from them can be considered as aeronautical income. And then landing fees, airline landing fees. So obviously on the air side of the operations, the usage of runways, for landing and takeoff, and usage fees for the terminals, that is usage fee that the airlines provide for making use of the facilities at the terminals, like gates. So we have discussed earlier about the terminal usage or the gate usage provisions or deals or contracts, etc., shared or dedicated ones, or and the multiple types of the priority usage, etc. So all the fee and income that are related to the usage of the terminal and the facilities by airlines, they also fall into the aeronautical revenue. And and then of course all that depends on the passenger traffic also, the fee that the airlines will have to provide. And so airlines, for an airport, as far as airport is concerned, an airline is like a tenant who pays for the usage of the space. And that space, when we say space, that includes the gate space, the counter, other facilities at the airport, and then the utilization of the hangars, the offices that they occupy for their staff within the airport, and the usage of the maintenance facilities. So all these fall under aeronautical revenue. That is all these rentals and the associated charges. In addition to that, landing and parking fees. We have mentioned it already. And, usage of the ticket, the counter, I guess that also falls in what was mentioned earlier. So I'm sorry, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. This call came and this got cut. Sorry about that. So all these come under the categorization of aeronautical income, aeronautical revenue for the airport. Now, as opposed to this, the non-aeronautical revenue, these are not directly to the flight operations as such, but then they are linked to the utilization of the airport premises for other activities. Say, for example, parking of vehicles in the ground transportation side. So on the land side operations, the utilization of the parking, then ground transportation and rental cars, that is, which are actually within the premises of the airport. So, for example, we have this prepaid taxi system. All that falls into the so the income that is associated to having a facility called the prepaid taxi system. So by way of the rentals that they pay, etc. So these are all related to the non-aeronautical revenues. Now, presently, airports keep focusing on non-aeronautical revenue also. In fact, if you compare the two, probably the non-aeronautical revenue may not be very high because in comparison to aeronautical revenues. But then airports are giving adequate importance for non-aeronautical revenue also. That is because aeronautical revenues are susceptible to large fluctuations, and they are also unfortunately linked to the fortune of the airline companies. Now, for example, if you consider an airport, Coimbatore Airport, let's say way back in 2010, 11, 12, etc. I know that Kingfisher had several flights from operating from Coimbatore Airport at that point of time, and not in the peak of Kingfisher operations, 2009, 2010, etc. But then, if you look at in that, I mean, then soon came their fall. So 10, 11, etc. They started vanishing from the scene. So if you look at that, the probably one of the major source of revenue for Coimbatore Airport was the deals with Kingfisher. And when Kingfisher started canceling their flights, grounding their planes, shutting down their itineraries, changing them, etc., then that would have significantly affected the revenue of the Coimbatore Airport. In fact, I have absolutely no idea about how much was the contribution, how big it was, etc. I'm just giving an example. I just want to show that airport revenue is linked to the fortunes of the airline companies, their falls and their prices, their falls, etc. So there can be a lot of fluctuations. So that's the reason that they want to also make sure that they have somewhat independent. I cannot actually say that the non-aeronautical revenues are completely free from the airline operations. They are not. But then at least they are not so strongly linked to the individual airlines. So that's the importance of revenue other outlets. So and then shopping outlets, etc., which are sort of external. In fact, within the terminal area, all the rental, this one, etc., are considered classified as aeronautical revenues. But then anything that is over and beyond them, a lot of these ones are considered or classified as non-aeronautical revenues. In fact, this all actually after the what they call as 9/11 attack in 2001, the Twin Towers in the US, the security measures worldwide were tightened, and we know that the reporting time has been increased after that. International flights insisted on having at least 3 hours reporting, etc. Earlier also it was 3, but then that instance, the adherence to that was more stringent afterwards. All this made sure that the passengers have to spend more time within the airports. The more the time that the passenger spends within an airport, the more likely is that they will visit the outlets like restaurants or the other shopping outlets, etc., and they will spend more in the airport. So all these in a way have contributed to increasing the revenues from the usage or the space for the related outlets, etc. So these kind of business opportunities were captured so that the overall revenues of the airport were increased. So to some extent, they would have contributed to aeronautical revenues as well. That's a reason why there is a strong emphasis, as we have seen in some of the airport presentations. They are trying to make the airport look like, now whether you classify the revenue as aeronautical or non-aeronautical is probably more like an accounting exercise or an academic matter of academic interest. But then what matters is that it contributes. The more a passenger is made to spend within the premises of the airport, the better it is for the airport, because a share of it goes to the or comes to the airport as its revenue. So that's a reason there is a constant emphasis on making the airports look like a mega store, like a huge shopping mall with a lot of variety of products, brands, and a lot of things in display, so that they keep attracting the or they keep screaming for the attention of the passengers, and which all can have a positive impact on the revenue from the various sources. Okay, now we'll look at the typical numbers. Again, I just taken it from the various sites related to the airports, etc. Some of them are from airport sites, but some others are from the related places of information. Any questions before that? Okay, then we'll just look at this. This is Chennai International Airport, financial year 2015-16, and effective from 1st April 2015. You can see the first line, as approved by AERA. So AERA we have seen already their goals and objectives, etc. Chennai International Airport being a major airport, their tariffs are under the regulation of laid out by AERA. So the order number, etc. is given there. Now what we have in this slide is the landing, parking, and housing charges, which the airlines have to pay to the airport for using their premises. As you can see, and it is quite intuitive that the payment is a function of the weight of the aircraft. Other aircrafts have to pay more, smaller will have to pay less. Now, so the first column, the title is weight of the aircraft. Second one is rate per landing. International flight. Obviously, for domestic and international flights, the landing parking charges will vary. So per landing, per international flight, how much an aircraft has to pay, or the airline company has to pay. And rate per landing, other than international, so all domestic flights, and probably they also mean whatever private flights, etc. in that. So international and non-international flights are the two categories. Now up to 1,000 metric ton of the 100 metric ton of the weight of aircraft, the rate per landing for an international flight is, or rather was, because it's 2015-16, I don't have the new numbers anyway. Probably they are much higher now. So anyway, in 2015, it was rupees 50 per metric ton. So if it is just 100 ton, you will have to pay this multiplied by 100. So per unit weight, the charge per landing for an international aircraft, this one have to pay is, airline company has to pay to the Chennai International Airport is rupees 650.40. For a non-international flight, say a domestic one, the charge is about half of it, 330, 331.2 per metric ton. Again, that's also is a function of the weight of the aircraft. Now, for larger aircraft, for any weight other than any excess weight other than 100 above 100 mt, we'll have to pay the whatever belongs to 100 mt, that 100 mt, which is 650 65040 plus 874 per metric ton for each ton above 100 mt. So for each metric ton above 100 mt, you have to pay an extra amount of 874 rupees in addition to whatever belongs to the basic 100 mt cost. And similarly, about half of it again for the domestic domestic landing. So you can see that it's fairly high amount by whatever means, by whatever standards. So this is a major source of revenue for the international airport, for any airport for that matter. And now this gives us also a feel as how much the COVID would have affected everybody when the flights were cut off and practically no operations were there, etc. So all these were fully cut off, and the airports also were all functioning in red, very understandably, because a major source of revenue has been cut. And not major source, actually, all sources probably, all practically all sources of revenue were cut off. So this is about landing just an example for landing charges with respect to a specific aircraft. That was about landing charges. We have also example for the numbers for the same airport, Chennai International Airport, the housing and parking charges for airline companies. Again, up to 100 metric ton, above 100 metric ton. Up to 100 metric ton, it's rupees 8.9 per hour. The parking charges obviously as a function of time. So 8.9 per MT for smaller aircraft, and 17.7 per metric ton for per hour for larger for domestic aircraft. I guess the division is again international and national. International aircraft, since they are operating with longer routes, and they will essentially will require more break between their flights, etc. That must be the reason why the parking charges are on the lower side for the long distance flights, whereas domestic flights are not likely to park for a long time. So the time hours per, or the charges per hour is higher for them, about twice that of the international flights. But then weight, the larger the flight, the larger the aircraft, the heavier the aircraft, the larger will be the fees. Again, after 100 mt metric tons, the international carriers have to pay 11.8 per metric ton per hour in excess of every ton after 100 mt, and similarly related increase in the case of about twice in the case of domestic airlines as well. So these are the parking charges for using the apron for parking the aircraft. And obviously, all these we should realize that all these get transferred to the passengers. So the airport usage fee, landing or parking, etc., eventually are passed down to the passengers in terms of the ticket fare by the airline companies, obviously. What's the time? I think I should stop now. If there is any questions, I'll take, otherwise we'll continue later. tomorrow being the exam day, I will skip the classes. You will be probably busy with the two subjects, two slots, or maybe preparing for them, etc. So tomorrow I am not engaging both the sessions. That is Thursday morning as well as afternoon. I'm not taking the class. We'll continue Friday onwards again. I guess by evening I'll put the schedule for the Viva. Tomorrow most probably I won't have the Viva, but then we'll have the Viva starting Friday onwards. Any questions? No. Okay, then we'll stop here now. See you day after tomorrow, Friday. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.